And we are back. Yes, baby. How y'all doing? We is back, honey, for number two of two.
There you
Make
go.
sure y'all follow, share, drop a comment, like the video, subscribe, okay? Make sure y'all follow us on Bigo for the raw and uncut, the grown folk version of what we talk about here. But you know what I'm saying? Of course, it's me, Ancestor Goddess, aka I'm a whole vibe, and I'm over here with Neat Trey Customs. Yes, a
Hey
Black
y'all,
Lives Incarcerated. What's up?
what's going on? What's going on?
Nothing much, nothing much. We are going to be learning about Marcus Mosiah Garvey Jr. Marcus Garvey. A lot of people kind of know, but don't really know the full detail of who Marcus Garvey was. Um, First off, he was a Leo. For a lot of people that are really heavy in zodiac signs, Marcus Garvey was a Leo. He was born August 17th, 1887, and he passed June 10th, 1940, which is kind of shocking, you know what I'm saying, for somebody to live that long. You know, you saw a whole you saw a whole world change before your eyes from the 1800s to the 1900s. And you got to think about it. Some of y'all great grandmas or great great grandmas or great granddaddies was, you know what I'm saying, still young and living at this time. Garvey founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, dedicated to promoting African American and resettlement in Africa. He got deported back to Jamaica due to mail fraud in 1922 involving the Black Star Line. All right. These are just little small little uh information that y'all didn't know. Garvey saw that blacks across the globe were largely being exploited and left out of the global economy. The Black Star Line would partly remedy uh or balance out that situation by facilitating the shipment of goods among the far people of the African diaspora, thereby fostering the growth of a self-reliant and resilient global black economy. So basically, Marcus Garvey started the, how can I say, the trades of goods and services for black people, uh, for the economy of black people from Africa to the Americans, from Jamaica. You know what I'm saying? So it's all like he pretty much was basically a cruise line that done everything, if that makes sense. He was the first international cruise line. The black
So,
oh,
oh, go ahead.
the Black Star Line would also transport immigrants to Africa for the establishment of a black nation state. Garvey started to solicit funds for the Black Star Line from his association, raised enough money. Uh, Hold on, from the association members at meetings in 1919, and soon raised enough money to establish the corporation. BSL, which is the Black Star Line, shares sold for $5, which allowed blacks of modest means to own a piece of the association's largest economic venture. So it was affordable enough for us to invest in so that you can reap the funds. So he pretty much was so another thing, he was a mobile, how can I say, a mobile Wall Street, pretty much, because you bought shares for $5, and he solicit. You know, if you don't know what solicit means, he actually solicited some employees during the meeting, um, which can be a little shady.
So basically, he was a stockholder.
Yes, he was a stockholder with a lot of outlets. Um, the association raised $800,000, and in the same year purchased uh the Black Star Line's first ship, um that uh was an attempted sabotage by his own people, his very own people that work for him. Um, it was called the Yarmouth, and it was a World War I freighter. So this freighter came from World War I, and then there was two other ships that were purchased, the Shady Side and the Kanawha were purchased later, and they also had similar problems. These ships failed due to employees doing sabotages, not actually working, actually destroying everything that was in the ship. Marcus Garvey was in prison in 1925, and he was pardoned by the president at that time. Um, and then he got deported back to Jamaica in 1927, where he later on passed away. He and he was from St. Ann's Bay, Jamaica.
Hold on, did you say he was pardoned?
Yes, he was pardoned and deported back to Jamaica. Let that sink in for a minute.
Whoa. Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. What? So for what
He was
though?
pardoned. He was pardoned because he went to jail for he got deported back to Jamaica due to mailing fraud.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Because
Okay.
remember how I was telling you he was also
Not
transporting
had to
goods
get
and service.
pardoned for mail fraud. So basically, you mean to tell me so that was their way of trying to stop the service that he was able to provide for. Okay, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was it. That was the last part. Yeah. Yep. Yep. It sounds like exactly what you saying right now. Mm-hmm.
I was about to say yeah. So tell me your feelings on it, like because you already know where I'm going with it.
Um, like I said, he was a businessman with a lot of outlets. And I wish that we could see these documentations of this mail fraud or what have you, because he was basically a cruise line who also picked up and dropped off goods and a whole bunch of other stuff. So he was a cruise line, and he was also a mobile Wall Street. Because remember, it gave black people uh 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 it gave us some, how can I say, some dignity to buy and purchase shareholders. And I'm seeing here, and back in that time, making raising 800,000, and then on the back end probably making like 1 to 2 million a year. So basically it was like him becoming so rich and having all this money and doing it legally, because there was never a I didn't see where they said something about it being detailed on what he actually did, but it's saying it's mail fraud. Ooh, excuse me. But they're calling it mail fraud. But when I was researching this on this article, this piece of this article wasn't really, it wasn't, you know what I mean? Like there was hardly few little details. Okay, it's mail fraud. Okay, where did it pinpoint the fraud? If that makes sense. Um, Marcus Garvey deserves more recognition. And that's all I'm gonna say.
So in my research, y'all, that's why I went off camera so I can bring up this video that I found about other black scholars speaking out about the falsehood of Marcus Garvey. So here we go. Let's see. I do have two 5 minute. They're about 5 minute videos that I'm going to play. Um, so here we go. Let me share my screen. And while I'm doing this, we would appreciate if you guys would like, subscribe, share, comment, you know, hit that post notification so you can know every time we go live. This is definitely a diverse platform here where you'll never know what we cover. You know what I'm saying? We just like to bring awareness to all situations, to everything that, you know, brings awareness to our people. So, yeah, like, subscribe, comment, turn that bell on, follow us on Bigo. The Bigo IDs are in the banner below. Here we go with the video, y'all.
On Black economic independence. Now, his 88-year-old son, activists, scholars, and others have launched a petition drive for a presidential pardon. And Kechi Taifa is the president of the Reparation Education Project, and she's also a frequent guest on the show. And Kechi, I want to set the table for our audience. They see Marcus Garvey as the man in the admiral's hat, but they don't realize the threat that Marcus Garvey posed. He wanted to liberate, which was then America's black labor force. And I'll set it up this way. Imagine, if you will, if every worker at Amazon said they wanted to leave Tennessee and then go to Ghana. Marcus Garvey was a dangerous man.
Yes, he was a dangerous man to the white supremacist system. He was talking about black pride. He was talking about black unity. He was talking about the cultural expansion of Pan Africanism. He is the person who coined Buy Black. He was talking about black economic independence. He had a communications arm and he was galvanizing the black world to be unified, and he was a threat. He was talking about having pride in your culture. He's the one who came up with the colors of red, black, and green, which is used in flags across the world. He talked about black dolls so that little black girls could have pride in themselves. He had a huge convention in 1920 that brought together people such as Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh, India's Mahatma Gandhi, Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah. We're talking about the father of Malcolm X, the Reverend Earl Little. We're talking about Elijah Poole, who later became known as Elijah Muhammad. All of these people learned from Garvey, came to that convention in 1920, and went on to fashion victories for struggles for victories across the world. He was a powerful man, and the United States determined that he must be stopped, and stop him they did.
And And that's what brings us to where we are. He was convicted for mail fraud. Explain the controversy, though, behind the conviction and deportation to his native Jamaica, because African Americans have a tendency to look at history and say, well, that must have been true. But one by one, we find out that wasn't necessarily the case.
Absolutely. Almost simultaneous with the rise of the Garvey movement was the rise of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which even at that early date was under the auspices of J. Edgar Hoover, who would much later go on to author the infamous COINTELPRO counterintelligence program, which sought to disrupt and destroy Black movements. But that started with the Garvey movement. He was convicted upon no evidence whatsoever, did not have the benefit of counsel. And even later on, it was determined that the trial itself was an absolute farce. So much that President Calvin Coolidge during that time did, in fact, commute his sentence, but he was deported back to Jamaica. His name was never cleared. And that's what brings us down through to today with his living son, the Dr. Julius Garvey, calling for not just a pardon, but that's the term that we use today, but actual exoneration, because they say he did nothing wrong. He was, in fact, framed and he was disgracefully banished from this country.
We should point out that the Garvey movement is still alive. Senghor Baye and others have been pushing now for a colony in Belize. But also, in a very real sense, we are right back to where we were during Garvey's times. 19 states now pushing to make sure that we can't vote. We are looking at the insurrection in which 6 of the groups that stormed the Capitol on January 6th were white supremacists. So that being said, do you think this time the movement to get his name cleared will have legs? I only have 30 seconds.
Oh, I sure hope so, particularly now where we have scores of Black booksellers joining up with the Caribbean Action Political Action Committee, calling for a worldwide campaign to garner 100,000 signatures this month, this Black History Month, a petition to the White House, to the Biden White House, calling for a posthumous, meaning after death, pardon for the Honorable Marcus Garvey. This month, if 100,000 signatures are garnered, then the White House will be forced to make a reply.
Let me just put it this way. If Nkechi is calling on you, Mr. President, you might want to pick up the phone. Nkechi Taifa is the president of the Reparations Education Project. And Nkechi, as always, thanks for being with us.
I never thought my love for dogs could be an e-commerce.
So what you think about that one?
Yes, she was very, very informative. I'm glad they got somebody that's determined to do what needs to be done. And and I completely agree with her. She is so right. Marcus Garvey was becoming a very rich, wealthy man, and they didn't like that. So, a very important figure to a lot of leaders that were soon, you know what I'm saying, killed or, some type of way. So,
St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica, August 3rd, 1897.
Hold on, y'all. Sorry. I agree. I do agree that she said that very well. And not only that, she basically, yes, sounds like she is being a force in what she's saying. So I'm with it. I'm with it. And she said no wrong to me. She told, how they say it, she told no lies. Okay. All right. So I want to see what this one is about as well. Because it says extra Black History. Okay, so let's see what they call extra.
A boy follows his father, a stonemason, into a graveyard. It's the first time his father has reached out for help, and he's excited.
Also, the description says the government investigation. So I want to see, I'm all about that, the investigations and the behind the scenes of everything. So yeah, here we go.
To be assisting the man he's idolized his whole life. They proceed to dig a grave, and once finished, his father makes an odd request for the boy to climb down to the bottom of the grave. Thinking it odd, but still wanting to make his father proud, he climbs down into the hole. But then once at the bottom, he watches as his father pulls up the ladder. Not sure exactly what was happening, the boy cries out and begs to be let out of the grave, but to no avail. After a few moments, he goes quiet, listening for a response. But it became clear that his father has gone. Eventually, the boy realizes what he must do and scrapes and climbs at the earth until after what felt like an eternity, he reaches the top. A harsh lesson of self-reliance that the stonemason meant to teach his son. And for better or worse, one he would never forget. That boy would go on to become one of the most controversial civil rights leaders in history, a man that would preach a gospel of racial pride and self-reliance to millions, and a man who would urge defiance and separatism in the face of oppression. A man named Marcus Garvey.
Let me show you how we do stuff around here.
Actually, my department uses Monday.com, so I'm good.
The work management tool? No, that's not for me.
Well, Monday.
Thanks so much to CuriosityStream for supporting our discussions of important historical stories. Marcus Mosiah Garvey was born in St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica in 1887, growing up under two opposing influences. His father, who you saw in the beginning of this episode, who stressed education but was cold-hearted, and his mother, whose kindness and encouragement fostered monumental confidence. Growing up, Garvey encountered racism from his white teachers, and because of restrictions within the Jamaican school system, would be forced to leave school at the age of 14. Then, becoming a printer's apprentice with his uncle Kingston, he learned a trade that taught him the power of the written word, a power he would wield in years to come. At age 23, Marcus traveled to Central America, where he witnessed how colonialism kept Black people isolated within certain areas, often living in squalor, while they simultaneously provided the back-breaking labors that kept national economies thriving. And 4 years later, he discovered the book that would act as the final piece in puzzling out his worldview, Booker T. Washington's Up from Slavery. Washington's book, coupled with his previous experiences, inspired his philosophy of Black nationalism, and Garvey wanted to unify Black people and put an end to their mistreatment worldwide. Then, returning to Jamaica in 1914, he fell in love with another young activist named Amy Ashwood, who he wooed while the couple teamed up to form the Universal Negro Improvement Association. But while the UNIA developed a following, Garvey increasingly made enemies by attacking other Black leaders and their integrationist views. And when his lack of business savvy led him to being confronted over financial irregularities, he set sail for America. Upon his arrival, with the help of fellow activist A. Philip Randolph, he set himself up in Harlem, New York. And soon after, he would begin traveling and speaking, all the while observing the plight of African Americans. Then in 1917, when East St. Louis erupted into a massive race riot, with white mobs murdering hundreds of Blacks, Garvey made a call for violent retaliation, directly contrasting with leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois, whose NAACP opted to hold a silent march in honor of the St. Louis victims. And once again, Garvey's criticism from established Black leaders alienated him from integrationists like Du Bois, and even Randolph eventually disavowed him. Only at this point, things were a little different, because now he had an ever-growing audience. A fire was burning, and Marcus Garvey had the gasoline. In speeches and newspaper articles for the UNIA paper, The Negro World, he would stress his belief that all Blacks must unite globally, and Black men should be prepared to meet oppression with force. He also encouraged confidence in Black women, stressing that they too should be protected, and that their beauty was a thing to be celebrated. And he reminded Black Americans that they were privy to the legacy of Africa and came from something greater than the deceptive stereotypes white culture had taught them. And he toured this message throughout the US, electrifying thousands and establishing new UNIA chapters. With 35 cents, anyone from African descent could join. Garvey also distributed uniforms and titles, and his Garveyites took to the streets during both scheduled and spontaneous marches, and his followers would wait for new issues of his newspaper, hanging on every word. When World War I ended, and it was clear that Europe and America stood poised to take further advantage of Africa's resources through colonialism, Garvey began pushing the idea of Africa for Africans. And the reach of his message extended even further, as Black soldiers returned from the war to find their dreams of equality still dashed. Garvey spoke to their frustrations. Meanwhile, the US government began becoming more aware of Marcus Garvey and the power he wielded. So they began an investigation on him, led by none other than J. Edgar Hoover, a man who would eventually go on to become the director of the FBI and the Black community's personal boogeyman for decades. Granted, in 1919, he was just a special assistant to the Attorney General, focused on political radicalism. And prior to later events in his career, like his men bugging the hotel rooms of Dr. King, encouraging the rift between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad, and sending infiltrators into the Black Panther Party, Hoover cut his teeth investigating Garvey. And once again, Garvey's lack of business savvy would be his undoing. While he'd managed to create businesses with UNIA funds, many of them were mismanaged, since Garvey had a habit of putting ill-equipped loyalists in key positions. And while many of his Harlem-based businesses teetered on the edge of ruin, it would actually be his vision for a cruise ship line that would finally, well, sink him. Months into a stock offering for his Black Star Line, Garvey purchased a 33-year-old coal boat he planned to retrofit into a cruise ship. After some hiccups, the ship made it to Cuba and Costa Rica, but Black Star Line would turn out to be no more than a very expensive symbolic gesture, because Garvey would be betrayed by people Hoover planted inside the UNIA. After gaining his trust, they tricked him into paying 6 times what the ship was worth, and later on, any other boats he acquired would be hobbled by saboteurs, damaging engines and fuel tanks. Yet despite all this, in August of 1920, Garvey's UNIA still hosted a month-long convention held in both Harlem's Liberty Hall and at Madison Square Garden. Thousands of delegates showed up, and Garvey publicly handed out unconventional and even silly-sounding titles. He named himself the Provisional President of Africa, and the delegates created a document titled the Black Declaration of Rights, declaring the UNIA a monarchy in exile that would someday petition the League of Nations to hand over its African colonies. Garvey also sent people to Liberia to begin laying the groundwork for an independent black nation, a homeland he hoped that all black people could eventually settle, though it should be noted that the government of Liberia did not approve. Some months later, Garvey's forward progress was halted, because in January of 1922, Hoover and the US government finally got him. With the Black Star Line nearly bankrupt, Garvey sent out flyers petitioning new investors with an image of a boat he hadn't yet paid for. But when it was revealed that that image of the unpurchased boat was doctored with the name of poet Phyllis Wheatley etched into the photograph as if it were the name of the ship, that minuscule fact gave investigators the leeway they needed to accuse Garvey of trying to deceive investors. He was charged with mail fraud and arrested. And while out on bail, Garvey made the horrible decision of meeting with the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, even inviting the man to speak at Garvey's rallies. Given his own championing of the Back to Africa movement, Garvey probably thought it made sense to team up with another segregationist. But this association simply provided ammunition to his critics in the black community. Then in 1923, Garvey made yet another poor decision: to represent himself in court. Convicted and given a 5-year sentence, President Calvin Coolidge pardoned Garvey after only 2.5 years, but only so the government could deport him. He'd received a hero's send-off in New Orleans and a hero's welcome back in Kingston, where he would have 2 sons with his second wife following his divorce of Ashwood.
Going from survival mode my whole life to having enough money to take my kids.
And finally, after suffering a series of strokes, he eventually died in London in 1940 at the age of 52. Ironically, the final stroke was brought on when he'd read a premature obituary that claimed he'd died broke and abandoned by his followers. Garvey's worldview, however, lived on. Malcolm X, himself a son of a murdered UNIA member Earl Little, adopted many Garveyisms. Also, Kwame Nkrumah, who led the Gold Coast to independence from Britain, named Garvey as one of his influences. And back home in Jamaica, he was declared their first national hero and was reinterred at a shrine in their National Heroes Park. Marcus Garvey was a separatist, a grave distinction between himself and the more often discussed civil rights leaders. And while his views, stubbornness, and questionable decisions definitely made him enemies, he was right to fight against the oppression that he saw. And in the end, some of his ideas, just like that young boy in the graveyard so long ago, eventually clawed their way to the surface and helped guide many others in changing the world. And you know, our ability to continue to tell important historical stories is substantially increased thanks to the good folks over at Nebula. Thanks to Nebula support, we're able to offer a ton of extra credits, extra history, and extra mythology episodes, all ad-free on their platform, as well as a few Nebula originals, such as the extra history Tipu Sultan Tiger or Tyrant, and my episode of their working title series where I get to jam about the opening sequence of Cowboy Bebop. Yeah, I promise I don't butcher Yoko Kanno's iconic theme over there. We love Nebula because they're a by creators for dream feature documentary that follows this.
All right. So, well, hold on, y'all. Let me get this off the screen.
So there was really no 100% evidence. So really, wow.
And they made up something. They just made up something. They just made up something literally.
Mm, 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 mm,
Mm.
mm. Sure.
All because a black person had power. They were scared because a black person had some
Mhm.
power. Now, It says descendants of Marcus Garvey ask Biden administration for pardon. What?
A death pardon at the child.
Cause Obama. So he been asking for. All right, so let's go back to the one 7 years ago. Hold on. Okay, so here we go.
Mm-mm.
See, that's
That
why I
is
be.
so.
That's why I be
That's
turning my camera off while I be doing my little cause I be looking weird. Hold on. Let me share. Um, and I can't see myself when I'm doing it because I be on another screen. All right, share. Here we go.
girl.
This is crazy.
Girl. That's so crazy to
It
me.
is. It is. What's
Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm.
this is beyond crazy. Here we go. Here we go, y'all. Hold on one second.
I think my father's legacy extends beyond civil rights in America. I think it's a human rights legacy because he was fighting for African people all over the globe. And his message was, up united people, you can accomplish what you will. And it was one of self sufficiency and self determination.
With time winding down on the Obama administration, Dr. Julius Garvey is seeking a posthumous pardon for his father, civil rights icon Marcus Garvey.
The idea of empowering a people, why in your father's era was that so dangerous?
Well, it was dangerous because it was upsetting the apple cart. His mission was to create a United States of Africa, so that what he was building was a nation in exile.
In 1923, a federal court convicted Garvey of mail fraud and deported him from the United States. Garvey's supporters argue the evidence was falsified and the charge politically motivated.
This guilty verdict, it was obvious. It was the persecution of one of the first major Black leaders in the United States. I mean, this is the man that Martin Luther King said was responsible for bringing dignity and consciousness to Black people in the United States of America. So this was really he was the first political lynching out of a slew of political lynchings that came down the line. Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Black leaders who fought for the rights of Black people in the African diaspora.
It left a stain on my father. I had to grow up with this idea of my father having been imprisoned in the United States. And, your initial understanding of the United States of America is that there's this wonderful flowering democracy, the best government in the world, and, the justice for everyone. And here you have a father who was a criminal. Then he must have been a criminal, until you get to understand the dynamics of the racism that's built into the system. And that's where we are today. That's where I have come to in terms of my own realization that it's the system. It wasn't my dad. My dad was a courageous human being who devoted his whole life to human rights.
When you think about this fight and the idea that we're in the last days of President Obama's presidency, what are you hoping?
Well, we stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before. And he was the progenitor of the civil rights movement here, the human rights movement across the world. I think this president has to understand that he is standing on the shoulders of those who have gone before in terms of the civil rights struggle, and understand that this in itself is important to his own legacy.
What would a posthumous pardon of your father mean for you and your family?
Well, I think it's bigger than that in terms of me and my family. I think, what does it mean for African people? And I think, what does it mean for African Americans, even more so? It's only here in the United States that Marcus Garvey is still, quotes, criminalized. And I think what it would mean is the lifting of this stain on his name, so that African Americans can feel free, as we do outside of the continent of America, free to recognize him as an ideal for which and towards which they can strive.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe.
more sentences than the last 11 presidents combined. But Obama has taken no action on several of the most high-profile prisoners seeking pardons or clemency. On Wednesday, we looked at the cases of Native American activist Leonard Peltier and Chelsea Manning. Tomorrow, we'll talk about Puerto Rican independence activist Oscar Lopez Rivera. But today, we look at another request for a presidential pardon, this one from the family of Marcus Garvey, a pioneering figure in the Black freedom struggle in the early 20th century, who inspired generations of civil rights activists around the world. In the 1920s, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover targeted Garvey for his political activity as a leader of the Pan-African movement. Garvey was convicted in 1923 on a charge of mail fraud and sentenced to 5 years in jail. His charges and conviction effectively ended Garvey's political movement and eventually led to his deportation back to Jamaica. This is Marcus Garvey's son, Dr. Julius Garvey of the Justice for Garvey movement, speaking in August.
The civil rights movement started with Marcus Garvey. That's acknowledged by Brother Malcolm. It's acknowledged by Martin Luther King. And it's acknowledged by anybody who knows history. The president stands on that foundation. So we think that the time is now to exonerate Marcus Garvey by a presidential posthumous pardon. And that's why we're here. Thank you.
And we'll be joined by Julius Garvey in just a second. President Calvin Coolidge commuted Marcus Garvey's sentence in 1927. However, the commutation still left Garvey's conviction in place. So we're going to ask Marcus Garvey's son, Dr. Julius Garvey, about his case. He's a cardiothoracic and vascular surgeon who's leading the Justice for Garvey effort. It's great to have you with us, Dr. Garvey. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us what you're doing.
Well, basically, we have placed before the president a petition for the posthumous pardon of my father. And it's well documented in terms of the legal aspect of it, because that's the foundation. The moral aspect of it is separate, as is the political aspect. But the legal aspect of it was prepared by a well-known law firm, Aiken Gumpower. And they've spent almost 2 years really working on it and going through the case as it existed. I mean, there are thousands of pages, etc., as well as the appeal, which was also denied. So it's a well-prepared document that shows that there was no evidence. There was a prejudice, a judge, there was perjury. The only evidence was an empty envelope, which was stamped with the black star line on it. No writing, no evidence that it was handled in any way by Marcus Garvey. Nobody knew what was in it because the person who presented the envelope couldn't remember what was inside the envelope. And also he was a perjured witness in that he was told by the prosecuting attorney to lie about the contents and whether he worked with the UNIA, etc. So, you know,
but before we go into all of that, for people, especially young people who have not heard of your father, talk about the context in which all of that took place. Talk about who Marcus Garvey was.
Yeah, it was a very important time because this was early 20th century. My father formed the organization Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League in 1914 in Jamaica, West Indies, came to the United States in 1916. And of course, this was 1914-18 war, the First World War, the so-called Great War. And there was a large movement of African Americans from the agricultural South coming to the North because there were jobs that were available now in terms of the industrialization process to back up the war machinery. And many young, quotes, white men had gone to war. So there were many jobs up north. So there was this migration. So we had, you might say, a Southern African Americans who had been subjected to, you might say, the lack of Reconstruction, where they were subjected to the black codes and Jim Crow laws and so on, coming up north, being able to be employed in the industrial process and then in a sense asking themselves now, well, what is freedom? How do I manage my future? You know, I've been sharecropping, I've been subjected to southern injustice. Here I am in the north. I mean, what is my dimension of freedom? You know, what are my citizenship rights? What are my human rights as a person? And my father, in a sense, had the answer because he had been all over the world and he had seen the conditions of African people in the Caribbean, on the continent, and also now in the Americas. And his idea was really to unite African people around the world because it was a process that had subjugated them. Now, this was 400 years of slavery and, you know, 50 or so years of colonialism. Colonialism, you know, started in 1885 with the Berlin Conference, where now Africa was simply invaded and dispensed to different European groups who just took over and, you know, reduced populations to peonage. And of course, post-slavery, you know, there was no assessment of the needs of African people who had been enslaved for such a long time. So there was no reparations for African people. The reparations was for the slave owners. So African people were destitute all around the world because of slavery, because of colonialism. And Marcus Garvey felt that, my dad felt that, you know, it was important to unite African people because with that unity, we would have some strength in terms of our resources, human and otherwise.
Well, let's turn to Marcus Garvey in his own words, speaking in 1921, shortly after returning from a long tour of the Caribbean and Central America.
It is for me to inform you that the Universal Negro Improvement Association is an organization that seeks to unite into one solid body the 400 million Negroes of the world, to link up the 15 million Negroes of the United States of America with the 20 million Negroes of the West Indies, the 40 million Negroes of South and Central America, with the 280 million Negroes of Africa, for the purpose of bettering our industrial, commercial, educational, social, and political conditions. As you are aware, the world in which we live today is divided into separate race groups and distinct nationalities. Each race and each nationality is endeavoring to work out its own destiny to the exclusion of other races and other nationalities. We hear the cry of England for the Englishman, of France for the Frenchman, of Germany for the German, of Ireland for the Irish, of Palestine for the Jew, of Japan for the Japanese, of China for the Chinese. We of the Universal Negro Improvement Association are raising the cry of Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. There are 400 million Africans in the world who have Negro blood coursing through their veins. And we believe that the time has come to unite these 400 million people for one common purpose of bettering their conditions.
And let's go to more of Marcus Garvey from July 1921.
We want to unite the Negro race in this country. We want every Negro to work for one common object, that of building a nation of his own on the great continent of Africa. That all Negroes all over the world are working for the establishment of a government in Africa means that it will be realized in another few years. We want the moral and financial support of every Negro to make the dream a possibility. Already, this organization has established itself in Nigeria, West Africa, and is endeavoring to do all possible to develop that Negro country to become a great industrial and commercial commonwealth. Pioneers have been sent by this organization to Nigeria, and they are now laying the foundations upon which the 400 million Negroes of the world will build. If you believe that the Negro has a soul, if you believe that the Negro is a man, if you believe the Negro was endowed with the senses commonly given to other men by the Creator, then you must acknowledge that what other men have done, Negroes can do. We want to build up cities, nations, governments, industries of our own in Africa, so that we'll be able to have a chance to rise from the lowest to the highest positions in the African Commonwealth.
That was Marcus Garvey speaking in July 1921. So Julius Garvey, can you tell us what happened to him and what you're calling for now, and whether you think there's any prospect that Obama will grant a posthumous pardon?
Yes, well, basically, he was targeted by J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI as early as 1919. He called him a Negro agitator up in Harlem who was agitating for radical measures of uplifting African people. So he infiltrated my father's organization. The first FBI, black FBI agent was hired at that point in time to infiltrate the organization, and there were many others. So Hoover and the Justice Department were looking for some means to criminalize Marcus Garvey so that he could be deported because he was an immigrant. He had filed his first papers, but they were keeping him from becoming a full citizen every time he left the country and so on. They wouldn't grant him visas to come back in, et cetera, et cetera. He had an attempt on his life by someone who came into the Liberty Hall, shot 3 shots at him. Two sort of hit him, grazed him, one in his leg. That person ended up, quotes, committing suicide within 24 hours after he was arrested in prison. So, he said he wasn't going to take the rap for himself. So there was a concerted effort, by whomever, but we do know also of J. Edgar Hoover. And they were trying everything. The Mann Act, of course, transporting a woman across the state line. The woman was my mother, his wife. Of course, she wasn't my mother yet at that point in time, but she was his wife. They were looking at him for tax evasion, and they were looking at him about the Black Star Line, which was his signature economic project to trade between Africa, the Caribbean, and the United States. So again, the whole idea was a political trial to destroy him and hence destroy the movement.
Have you heard from the White House?
No, we have not heard back anything from the White House.
Well, we're going to do part 2 of this fascinating discussion of your father, Marcus Garvey's life, in a post-show discussion, and we're going to post online at democracynow.org. Dr. Julius Garvey is a cardiothoracic and vascular surgeon who's leading the Justice for Garvey effort, seeking a posthumous presidential pardon for his father, the civil rights leader, Marcus Garvey. And that does it for our show.
All right. So, yeah, this is a very, I feel like, controversial topic. I'm not understanding why, way back when, when they asked President Obama to pardon, this situation so that, his name can be cleared if that's what his family wanted. I don't understand why it's such an issue. Um,
I agree.
as well as like, I mean, like, yeah, just give the family some peace. I mean, not the family, give the world some peace about the situation. Because as I'm going through the videos over here, it's literally showing that some people are saying that he's a fraud. You know what I'm saying? So it's
Hmm.
but I'm gonna let you talk. I'm going on mute.
Um, it's almost like there are pros and there are cons. And all I have to say to that is let the evidence or whatever evidence there still is left of this, let it be shown. Like I get it, you know what I'm saying? As a worker, you have to sit here and pay, you know, you have to personally buy in to fund these ships and everything like that. But I wish if that was the case, Marcus Garvey is very intelligent. You know what I'm saying? He was a businessman. So with that being said, you trying to explain business to a whole bunch of your people who don't really understand because they're not illiterate enough. So I believe it was just a bit misunderstanding, a bit miscommunication. But as far as him being imprisoned for mail fraud, I would like to see evidence because I want to know. I mean, you're saying that it's mail fraud, so that means he had to somehow, some way. shipping documents or something to, whatever the case may have been. But I highly do recommend that Marcus Garvey does get some more recognition and he gets pardoned even in death so we can, finally put this to rest. I don't know why it takes so long, but it kind of explains um why it really does explain why Obama really couldn't do anything. It's, you know what I mean? Yeah, most definitely.
So my take would be that, for the most part, I would just say that, um, I'm not really sure on the mail fraud part. I just really feel like they didn't have anything else to charge him with. I feel like they didn't, that's the modern day, not mail fraud, wire fraud. You know what I'm saying? That's the modern these days they would call that wire fraud and not, I guess, that was the beginning of that type of, but I'm still not understanding what it is that was such a fraud. If he was shipping something, or if he was, you know, um bartering or showing, others how to network or find other resources to get things done. I'm not sure how him sharing information would be mail fraud, even if it was through a document or something, especially something that he paid for, or something that, oh, it did say that he was trying to get people to invest in the stocks, I guess, of that company,
Yeah,
or
five
his
dollars, five
movement.
dollars a stock, $5 a share,
And I guess it
which
became
is a lot back then.
true, but I guess it became fraud when he knew that there wasn't any, I guess, any more motion in the it wasn't really going to be anything, coming from that company, should I say. So he still had people investing in it. But I mean, that's why you get people to invest, right? I'm confused. I mean, I still don't see the, you know what I'm saying, because that's what you get people to invest for, so that you can scale, or so that you can take it to the next level, or so that you can, innovate another idea through that business, or whatever the case may be. So I still don't see what he did wrong. Like I said, all I see was a black man who had resources, who had some power, and they were scared.
It almost sounds like he was creating his employees a 401k.
Right. And yeah, I mean, like you said, the being that he was a stockholder, or the owner of and at the end of the day, like, that's what we do. You know what I'm saying? He was giving out shares of his company. Like, that's what they do these days. So I'm not understanding how, what's so illegal about it. You get what I'm saying? Like, what did
Right.
he do wrong? Oh, is it just because he was giving the information out to black people that, you know, because you can invest in the stock market, or the stock of that company, but you
Hmm.
don't have to be investing in that company per se. You get what I'm saying? Like, it
Right.
doesn't have to be going towards the building or nothing of that company. It could, you just investing on the stock market. That's two totally different things. So I'm still not understanding what he did wrong by marketing, shares in his stocks, especially if it was to, people who worked for him, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, that's why I would say that's why it was mail fraud, maybe back then. Um, it's the modern day, or today's wire fraud. Basically, giving out fraudulent information to obtain funds, basically, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Because, like you said, I guess $5 was a lot back then.
Right.
And it's so crazy how, like, it's the 2020s. Like this is what y'all consider the new millennium, and y'all still it's still a question to pardon a dead person.
Mm-hmm.
That's sick. Sorry, not sorry. That is sick. That is
Yeah.
sick, especially to someone who holds power. But hey, hey, you can't just like some you can't tell nothing to these people supporters and stuff like that. Me personally, I find something very odd and strange about that, especially if it was a movement to bring knowledge or awareness to resources for
And wealth to
our
the to
people.
the to the north,
There you
a
go.
wealth, a whole lot of wealth to
There
the
you go.
modern black families.
There you go.
And just
But see that
imagine the influence that he had on other great leaders like Malcolm and Martin and a whole lot of more
yeah.
people. Elijah Muhammad, who was also a very powerful speaker as well. So yeah, it's it's insane. And y'all need to go ahead and pardon him, due to the simple fact that this has been on the shelf way too long, like over 3 years,
Um
maybe about five.
what what the video that we just watched of him asking President Obama was 7 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like seven, like I was getting like more than 5 years. Seven, okay, so 7 years. So yeah, that's too long. That's way too long. So
And they're still asking. Okay, so here, so
and
hold
so
on.
then they had, yeah,
They're
I
asking,
heard they still asking, now they asking the Biden administration because somebody had knew was taking office. They couldn't ask, they couldn't ask 2 years, 3 years prior because what he was gonna do, right? So
but that's probably the one they should have asked,
yeah,
especially if they had a little piece of change to donate.
mm-hmm. To
He
to to
he let Kodak go, and he alive.
mm-hmm.
I, come on now, be for real. We ain't gonna we don't know what all was. Or personally don't know what all came in that deal or came in. You
But if
know,
you got the money to invest into my business that's going bankrupt, mm,
so with that being said, this will be the last video that I'm gonna show with the updated presidential administration. They are still asking for this pardon, and this video is of 2 years ago. Here we go. Okay, okay, okay. All right, here we go, y'all. Hold on one second.
Mark Lamont Hill. Let's begin with the high-profile trial of actor Jussie Smollett as the defense rested its case for the Empire star, who returned to the witness stand earlier today to refute claims that he staged a hate crime in downtown Chicago in 2019 and lied to police about it. Smollett said the accusations that he orchestrated a racist and anti-gay attack are, quote, 100% false. During cross-examination, the actor denied the testimonies of the men at the center of the attack, the Osundairo brothers, who claimed Smollett provided them with money and instructions to carry out the hoax in order to gain publicity. They also claimed they received a $3,500 check from Smollett to fake the attack. Smollett faces 6 counts of disorderly conduct for lying to the police, with closing arguments scheduled to begin tomorrow. In other news, the United States Justice Department has filed a lawsuit against the state of Texas over voting rights. The department is challenging the state's redistricting plans for the congressional delegation and the Texas House of Representatives. BNC's Derek Lewis has more from Houston.
New congressional maps had to be redrawn after the U.S. Census reported more than 4 million people moved to Texas since 2010. Republicans drew the new districts that some say give Black voters less power to choose their representatives. The Justice Department is suing the state.
A core principle of our democracy is that, quote, voters should choose their representatives, not the other way around.
People of color make up 95% of the state's latest population growth. The new redistricting map by a Republican majority in the state House diminishes the rights of those voters, according to the Department of Justice.
That not having an effect on the maps and the kinds of districts drawn really frustrates the political power of populations that are in fact the majority in Texas.
The Southern Coalition for Social Justice works on redistricting issues. Advocates say the DOJ's involvement shines a spotlight on the problem.
I think it also helps raise the profile and understanding of how district lines can harm communities of color.
The state's Democratic Party has been fighting against gerrymandering in Texas for years.
There have been several lawsuits filed by Democratic leaders and advocacy groups across Texas to really make sure that the courts can review some of the racist gerrymandering that we've seen.
Dozens of Texas House of Representatives flew to D.C. over the summer to push for federal voting legislation. Advocates say that will make it easier to avoid voting rights issues in the state and focus more on the future of equality in voting.
We have a decade to really fix the process so that we can ensure that as communities grow across the country and across Texas, that when we get to 2030, we're going into that process in a fair manner.
I'm Derek Lewis for Black News Tonight.
Descendants of Black revolutionary leader Marcus Garvey are seeking a posthumous pardon from the Biden administration. Garvey, founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or the UNIA, encouraged pride among African Americans and those throughout the African diaspora. When the worldwide activist caught the attention of the FBI, he became a target. The FBI sent their first Black undercover agent to spy on Garvey, and in 1923, the Pan-African leader was convicted of mail fraud. The family of Garvey is applying pressure to the Biden administration in the hopes that the president will keep his promise of correcting historical injustices, as they believe Garvey was wrongfully convicted. Joining us now to discuss this is Dr. Greg Carr. He's an associate professor of Africana Studies at Howard University. Dr. Carr, welcome to Black News Tonight. Marcus Garvey died over 81 years ago. There are some people that are going to say, why y'all worried about something that already happened? Even if it's true that he got railroaded, which it is, even if it's true that they plotted against him, which they did, what difference does it make now? Why put the energy there? What do you say?
Well, I kind of feel that way too, Mark, quite frankly. But for me, it's very simple. I know Dr. Garvey, Julius Garvey, Marcus and Amy Jacks Garvey's surviving son. He wants it, so I want it. It's just that simple. I don't give a damn about the United States government, and they were wrong. In fact, at the time that Coolidge commuted Garvey's sentence, he was in Atlanta Penitentiary and deported him in 1927. Calvin Coolidge, President Coolidge's own attorney general, said that the case had been overstated. This came down to young Jagger, who were trying to make a name for himself, cutting his eye teeth on surveillance of Black folk, in collusion with international forces. The Garvey movement had spread throughout Africa. It was the largest movement of Black folk in the world. And now, Barack Obama missed an opportunity. Dr. Garvey and all his supporters, including me, approached the government to pardon the attorney in 2016. He missed then. John Conyers had introduced resolutions as early as the 1980s. Charles Rangel in 2009. So to see Representative Yvette Clarke now, lining up to introduce a resolution, this is a no-brainer for Biden. My question, quite frankly, is why wouldn't Barack Obama do the easy thing? And that's just an open question for me.
That's one of them questions. I know you're a professor. That's one of them questions you ask and you know the answer.
Yes, sir. He ain't that black, brother. But that was easy. Normally I would put on some clothes, brother, but I had to rep my Black Star Line hoodie that I got on 125th Street many years ago, Mark, because This is easy, brother.
Yeah, no, it is, and for those that don't know, the Black Star Line was in fact a product of Marcus Garvey, and the idea of the Black Star Line was as a ship to bring Black folk back to Africa as part of a project of reimagining Black political possibility, that Black folk could develop themselves or replant themselves on the continent of Africa. And of course, there's a long, complicated story about what that ended up looking like that we could talk about as well. But the government wasn't about that, right? J. Edgar Hoover was spying on Marcus Garvey and just looking for a way to get him deported because of what the UNIA was doing. And it seemed to me, Greg, that it was paving the way for how the FBI would later target other civil rights leaders and Black freedom fighters.
Absolutely. The playbook for COINTELPRO in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, the playbook for this Black identity extremism that we see being pushed now, even in the federal government today, even the playbook for the surveillance in the 1940s. Here we are on the anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and they want to talk about the Black people who fought in the war. Maybe we want to talk about J. Edgar Hoover and the racial conditions memo he wrote in World War II when he had Black people under surveillance. It all comes back to Hoover and Marcus Garvey. Hell, even in what was it, Boardwalk Empire, when you see the great Jeffrey Wright playing Valentine Narcisse, you see this J. Edgar Hoover character obsessed with Cyril Briggs and Marcus Garvey. It's all about surveillance of Black folk. And you know, it's interesting, right there in Harlem, where Garvey set up his first chapter of the UNIA, there was a sister who, like you, a fellow bookstore owner, Una Malzak. Remember Liberation Bookstore? I got a copy of Una Malzak. You know what I'm saying? Sister Una put in my hand a copy of A Star to Steer By. That was the autobiography of her father, Hugh Malzak, who was the captain of the SS Yarmouth, which was one of the 3 ships that the UNIA purchased. The Yarmouth was the one that would go to the Caribbean, and they would load up with stock with cargo to bring back to New York to sell, fruit and things like that. They couldn't leave the dock because what Captain Malzak said was Black folk would bring their children down to the dock to see this ship staffed by Black men operating, and Garvey, they would cable New York, and Garvey would like, you know what, if the fruit rots, whatever, let them see, because I want them to see the possibilities of Black life. The UNIA owned 3 ships, and when the feds got Garvey, they convicted him with the testimony of a witness who wasn't in the original indictment, who couldn't show that he had ever bought any stock. The only piece of evidence introduced into evidence was an empty envelope that was said to have had a stock certificate in it, and the other 3 defendants were exonerated and found not guilty. And 9 of the 12 jurors, after they convicted him, signed a petition to have the president of the United States vacate the sentence. So this is low-hanging fruit, man. Again, Barack Obama, brother. I know you love to call that brother the Black president, but yeah, whatever. Joe Biden, do the right thing. Do the right thing, Joe.
Look, hopefully Joe will do the right thing, because this is, for me, this is an opportunity to open up not a conversation about avenging the name or the legacy of Marcus Garvey. Black folk have done that for ourselves. Can't no white man, can't no government, can't no state do that for us. It's up to us to honor the legacy of Marcus Garvey. But I do think when you talk about the SS Yarmouth, we can talk about the SS Frederick Douglass that came after that. We could talk about the idea of a company that, I mean, had a capitalization, what, $10 million, which is like worth a couple $100 million now. You're talking about the possibility, the living possibility of Black do for self economics. And the Black Star Line and the trading company that it produced was about, I mean, it was about Black people producing for self, trading, shipping, doing so much, and then ultimately us ourselves repatriating to Africa. I mean, this was a vision that was so ahead of its time. And I really hope that in the conversation about pardoning him, whether they do it or not, will remind Black folk that we can do for ourselves, for us, by us, and that we can revive that legacy and memory moving forward. That's what I really care about. But anyway, Doc, I'm gonna have you back because they making me run. But we're gonna talk later. And as always, thank you for your brilliant insights and that fly sweatshirt. Everybody, stay with us here on Black News tonight. Enjoy. You gotta rock it. You gotta rock it. Be sure to join the conversation.
All right, y'all. So yeah, I think they really just put that very well. Like he basically made me understand part of the case that I didn't understand. You get what I'm saying? So it's like
Yeah, especially if nine of the jurors signed a petition for the president to pardon him, why wasn't he pardoned? Why hasn't he still been pardoned? That video was from 2 years ago. The first one, when about the president, when the son asked the president, was 7 years
Mhm.
ago. That one was 2 years ago. And you mean to tell me he still hasn't been pardoned? Maybe y'all should have asked Donald Trump. I think he would have did it.
Mhm. Who's to know, right?
Say that again.
I said, who's to know, right? Who is to
Right,
know?
right, right. But I get, and then this is we praise these Democratic leaders. We beg
I
everybody to
praise
vote.
no Democrat or no Republican. I
There
just
you
need
go.
somebody to go in there and do right by the people.
There
Don't
you
give
go.
a damn if you excuse my French, YouTube, but I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. Can you do right by the people? If you can't do right by the
And doing
people, then you need to get up out of there.
doing right by the people is not misinforming or
Hmm.
misguiding or giving out misinformation. That is definitely not doing right by the people, y'all. So I said that to say, instead of, I feel like it's better for us to actually just tell the truth so that we all can heal. We can heal and transform that energy because energy can never be created or destroyed. It's only transferred or transformed. So once we can transform, because it's so crazy how we still dealing with stuff from 1865 today.
Hmm.
Like, and then y'all are just recognizing, like, for something that happened in 1865, y'all just putting it on the, like, y'all making it, something big in 2021. Like,
Exactly.
and not saying that it's wrong for being known, but how long was it gonna take y'all? And not only that, I
It
mean,
it gives out an insight on what everybody else doing. Mm.
right, and it also gives out, um, it tells a major insight. It gives a major insight on how um
How you
equal
get caught?
things really are for real. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
and how you get caught up.
There you go.
Hmm.
When you outsmart them, they're coming for you. When
Hmm.
you give out some great information that will move us as a unit,
Hmm.
when we start you moving as a unit, that creates waves, whether we know it or not.
And
One
everybody
person,
get
as
real
y'all can see,
nervous.
right? They get scared, and I'm not understanding why. I'm not understanding why, because it's still like that right now today. Look at Monique. Look at Monique. That's sad. When I tell you, like, I have a newfound respect for her because guess what? She's still standing her ground. She's like,
Hmm.
this is not right. I'm still gonna tell my story. I don't care who don't like it. But this is what
Exactly.
y'all do to try to shut us out. This is what y'all do. My whole family took a hit behind this because of what? Because of, first of all, a lie, and everybody know a lie don't care who tell it.
All skin folk ain't kinfolk, baby.
And we're trying to get justice for a black man that is deceased. Y'all ain't have no respect for the dead, nor do you have any for the living.
Yeah, given the fact that his son is 88 years old, probably
Facts.
90 now, but yeah, that ain't right.
And thank God for a son that is basically his personal activist who can still tell his story, who can
Hmm.
still here right now to be able to speak his voice and tell what really, because without him, guess what? Who how can we know? How would I even be able to
Right.
understand what's going on? This
Right.
is why we have come together to basically, uh shoot, research and find out more about our culture and the things that the civil rights activists, you know what I'm saying, came together you know, to make us equal to the rest of society. And guess what? It's still not equal. You know why? We still have, especially where I live in Southwest Florida, especially where Vibe live in Georgia, just because of the color of our skin, we are targets for, guess what? Trouble. We
The
have no
fool.
authority, right?
Fools.
I'm labeled already because of the color of my skin. That's no fair. That's no fair. That's not right. Not right at all. And at the same time, like, so it scares me. Like, I've seen a police officer actually target older, dark skinned or colored women. You know how scared that make me for my grandma, my mama. Like, for real. And they ain't did nothing. I'm so happy that we have the modern day bait cars. I'm so happy that we have people that actually go out and pay for these body camera footages that show the injustices, the inhumane treatment, the that we still go
Hmm.
through right now today, that we still suffer from right now today. Cause all of y'all love to say racism isn't real.
It's very much real. It's worse. It's worse now than it was then.
Right. And not only that, it's like, because guess what? Black lives incarcerated. Y'all try everything y'all can to incarcerate us, but y'all give them more freedom. Y'all give them more authority. You get what I'm saying? No, 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 no. That's no fair.
And let's not despite the fact the unknown bodies that get buried in the backyard of a certain prison.
Facts. What nobody
You don't even know your child or your uncle, your niece, your nephew, whoever, grandson, granddaddy. You don't know that person
right,
still living or not until you
right,
actually call the jail yourself. That's why y'all
right.
need to check up on your
Your
family
people, check
members
on
that's
your
in
people,
there.
right?
Even
Facts.
though if they in there doing life sentences, baby, just call and check up on them.
And to let them know that, guess what, they still have a voice, whether even they know it
Hmm.
or not. You feel what I'm saying? Like, and another thing too, y'all already got criminals locked up. How I don't understand how you got a jail inside of a jail. Either you have a special housing unit for these motherfuckers where this is where they at all day every day.
Hmm.
When you fuck up, this is what you go into a whole nother woodoo whoop, then this is the
Hmm.
special housing unit. If you can't act right in general population, then because it's too many, you know what I'm saying? And
Hmm.
another thing too, the vibrations that have been sent out, the energy of the vibrations that linger among us, you know what I'm saying? Like, we have to transform that energy. If we don't transform that energy, then we are going to be kind of like stuck in a low vibrational frequency.
Hmm.
And guess what? It's gonna always be chaos. It's gonna always be destruction. It's gonna always be uh people that,
Frustration.
there you go, confusion, delusion, illusion. Um, you know, I mean,
Right.
I feel like we should just, even though we, there's probably not, well, there is a way to kind of correct things, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, now is the time where we actually just start informing the right information from the get go, baby.
Hmm.
Make sure y'all like, subscribe, comment, um, hit that post notification bell if y'all aren't subscribed. We are going to basically be here all of Black History Month. I think this might become an official topic, being that we do have the movement Black Lives Incarcerated going on, and that's
Mm.
more than just our people that are in the prison system or the penal system, however you guys call it. It's more than just incarceration in a jail system. That's incarceration how the government,
Your banks, your affordable
there you go.
housings,
There you go. There you go. Your public housings.
your
You know what I'm
public
saying?
housings, your dealerships,
There you go. Um uh just basically
your loan
everything that
companies, your
yes,
credit card companies.
there you go. Mhm. There you go. And it's a lot that is associated with that. You know what I'm saying? Um we always hear the phrase of the 40 acres and a mule. So maybe that might be a topic that we will cover tomorrow. I also think that I will be covering the real reason Rosa Parks was tied on that bus. Okay. So I think we're gonna end it here, y'all. It was great. I actually learned some things. I'm happy that we're doing this so that we can bring awareness so that you guys can learn with us as well. Um, Follow us. We will be going over to Bigo. Tonight's show will be at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We will be having our show, Mystical Resin Vibes, where you get the raw and uncut version of us. If you would like to see that, you can follow,
Yeah, come
like I
on over
said,
here to the
the
hood, to the ghetto.
banner. Yes, follow the banner, the both of the the Bigo IDs down below, Ancestors Goddess and Neeks Trey Customs. Y'all make sure y'all put y'all customs with the Z and not the S, okay? Because it's the big Z, okay? Um, like the video, share it, share down, okay? And make sure you guys, tap in,
And we
if
know this video is kind of long, so if you gotta watch half of it, not half of it later, that's all right too. But just make sure you
right.
leave when this series is over with. Make sure you leave with a little bit more information each time.
Facts. And actually the
Do
correct information. You know what I'm
yes.
saying? We want everyone to be aware and informed because we come here to elevate, motivate, and achieve. Okay. Period. All right, y'all. Thank y'all for, watching the video. Share it down. We will be back tomorrow with another topic. We going live in 30 minutes across the way. So we'll see y'all there. Bye, YouTube.